Hello, and thank you for dancing in the discomfort zone with us today. Today I've got John D. Domenico. He is a speaker, a podcast host, and he is an Emmy-nominated, award-winning MC and five-time Best of Las Vegas comedian impersonator. John, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm so excited. By the way, I've won every award, and I've won every award that's ever been. I'm winning awards right now as we're
I just
sitting
awarded
here.
you one.
So many. I won the Bonney Award, which I appreciate because no one's ever received that before, and I didn't know you gave a Peace Prize. So thank you for the Bonney Peace Prize. I appreciate that. The one from FIFA is so nice.
Start there,
so
John.
Nice. Been doing that one since 2004, so that's been a while.
Since he joined the conversation, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so just tell me a little bit about your background first, just so the audience knows who they're listening to. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up here on through the
I was born I came out of my mother's room with a top hat and a cane, and I was called a canned ham as a kid. I grew up in a row home neighborhood outside of Philadelphia. It looked like South Philly, but we were just right outside. And right away, 4 or 5 years old, I just wanted to be in front of the neighbors when they sat out on the steps. And around 5 years old, I would watch Ed Sullivan. I'm 63. So I'd watch Ed Sullivan Sunday nights, and my favorite thing, because I had a very tough upbringing, very abusive household, but my favorite thing was the comedians. I love the comedians, and I love the impressionists. And I would watch John Biner come out, because Ed Sullivan would say, "Now, right on our shoe, the very funny John Biner." And John Biner would come out and he would say, "Now, right here on our show, it's Ed Sullivan." And they'd cut over to Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan would actually be angry because he hated people doing his impression. But as a kid, I was like, wait a minute, how's this possible? That's Ed Sullivan's voice, and John Biner's doing Ed Sullivan's voice. And I would watch the impressionists so closely, because I had a severe speech impediment, which I'll come back to. But I learned John Biner's act. And that following Friday, all my neighbors were all sitting out, all the pregnant moms who were smoking and drinking. And I walked up, and they're all watching me. And I said, "Now, here in our show, the fabulous Garbazzo brothers, they'll be flying around from Brooklyn. Girl Scout Troop 625, girls, show us your cookies." And they laughed. And here I am, 5 years old, and I'm like getting the affirmation that I just wasn't getting at home, and the attention. And I just thought this was the greatest thing. The greatest thing, like being a performer, being in front of a crowd. It's just so great. And I'm sure you get that energy. Yeah. Like you get in, and I got it at 5 years old. It's like, I want to be an actor.
Laughter is like crack to a kid.
It is. It's funny you say that. I call it my heroin. Yep. And my mom was always my first audience, and she was very impressed because I had this speech impediment. I really couldn't speak properly when I wasn't doing an impression. So when I got into first grade, they diagnosed me, and then for the next 8 years, I did speech therapy 2 times a week. And the speech pathologist and speech therapist really liked that I loved doing impressions, because it was a way in to help me be a better impressionist, at the same time becoming a better speaker and having much more command and control. And so they taught me about throat placement, tongue placement, which was the primary issue with me. Tongue placement, jaw placement, nasal placement, speaking through the vocal mask. They really taught me that I should be speaking about here, and it was all more kind of a mess. And they broke everything down. And as they broke each element down, that's how I learned to do impressions, because when I look at any impression, doesn't matter if it's Austin Powers, I'm always looking at where is it in the throat, Where is it in the mouth? Where's my tongue placement? Where's my jaw placement? Where's my nasality? All of those elements. And then there's, as a comedian, impressionist, you kind of, what's the secret sauce? They weren't teaching me secret sauce. But, for someone like Dr. Phil, I'm looking for a different kind of placement in my throat and in my face, right? What were you thinking? Okay. And if I'm doing something like Guy Fieri, baby, that's definitely the throat placement, baby. Love piece of taco grease, man. Bling, bling, baby. So that, and
you're good.
Yeah, I just loved it. Well, it's funny because a lot of certain voices fall into categories, and I loved Groucho when I was a kid, and he did this. He used to sing, "Hello, I must be going. I came to say I cannot stay. I must be going. I'm glad I came, but all the same, I must be going." La la, and that was from the 40s. But I would watch all those movies, and I was like, oh, he's music. He does his jokes musically, and I thought that was very interesting. And I always learned where people were from. He was from the Upper East Side. They're Ukrainian. The Marx brothers were Ukrainian, but they were from the Upper East Side. So I always made sure to have that New York, just a little bit of New York in there. And when I started doing Trump early in 2004, 2005, I had met him in '90. In person, because I worked for him. I did a show in Atlantic City at the Plaza. When I meet famous people or big characters, if you look at my whole repertoire, it's always big characters. But I was doing him in 2004, and I was using a lot of Groucho, because if you listen to the way Trump speaks, it's that very sing-songy type of thing when he speaks. And then around 2015, I did him for years. A lot of corporate stuff, a lot of large apprentice games. I did a lot of after dinner speaking as him, but I did roasts, and people love the roasts. They love the Trump roast. And when he announced in 2015, I thought, you know what? I should probably go back and fine tune this, because when you're an impressionist, you have this. I've talked to this and other impressionists. If you do a voice for a long time, you start doing an impression of an impression. You're doing an impression of your own impression. You're getting away from the actual voice. You're doing your own voice, so you get further and further away. That's how I ended up on all these late night talk shows, because I was one of the few people doing Trump in 2015. But I thought, let me go fine tune the voice. I always build every impression on other impressions. That way you can't lose it. Because if you ever watch a bad actor in a community theater show doing a French accent, all of a sudden they're doing something totally different because they can't hold on to it. Yes, so I always like to knock it, nail it down. So I had Groucho, and I thought, Trump's from Queens. Who else is from Queens? Is there another actor? Who's from Queens? And I went, oh my God. The other person from Queens is Christopher Walken. And Christopher Walken also has that staccato thing that Trump has. Frankenstein never scared me. Marsupials do. So I kind of I structurally built Trump's voice on top of Groucho and on top of Christopher Walken. So when I'm doing Trump, and Trump is aging, obviously, so I'm always updating the voice now. But if you listen to my Trump voice, there's a great deal of Christopher Walken and a great deal of my speech therapy, because they always had me over enunciate. And I was like, oh, and they were always like, speed up your cadence, slow down your cadence, speed up your cadence. All these things from speech therapy are the things I use in probably Trump the most.
It's like your master's in impression.
Yeah.
Impressions, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting because there's so many pieces to it, but I've never heard somebody who does impressions talk about breaking it down this way.
And yeah, the
from
elements.
yeah, exactly. I always thought people just kind of felt it and then they did it, because there's also your pacing. There's also the, like you said, the
The
inflections.
cadence, the
And then
musicality, the
words,
inflection,
and
yeah.
exactly. And then the way you repeat certain things, like especially with Trump. So it's fascinating to hear how technical this is.
Oh,
which of course probably is why you're
it's
good at
also, you know, speech is incredibly technical, and it's what I speak about, because our the human voice is really a miracle. It's truly a miracle. We're the only species, there's over 1 million species on the planet. We're the only species that's able to do what we do, not thousands of words, but millions of words in 194 different languages. And it's neurological, it's these electrical synapses happening. It is so precise. It is so amazingly precise. And, you know, that's why when people have strokes, it's the first thing that goes, because it just knocks it right out of sequence. And you don't have those synapses, the neurological part and the synapses in the throat firing at the same time. But also, in my research, the reason we're able to speak is evolutionary. Over time, things were removed from our vocal folds. Because if you look at primates, gorillas, chimpanzees, all those, they actually have a more complicated vocal folds, vocal cords is what we, commonly call them. They're actually more complicated. But in that complication is that shrieking, you hear people, that's uncontrollable. So our evolutionary thing was that was removed, and that's what gives us command and control of our voice, this weird thing that disappeared over time. And that's another thing that I speak about, is having command and control of your voice. Because I'm very lucky, because right away at 5, 6 years old, they had to teach me how to hear my voice. Mm-hmm. That was the major thing. Like, you have to hear your own voice. So they would put earplugs in, mm-hmm. so I could hear my voice, because the average person only uses 38% of their voice, their vocal range and capacity, unless they've had vocal training of some kind. If you're like mm-hmm. Mariah Carey or any singer. And again, neurologically, your brain shuts out your own voice, and the human head lowers your voice and makes it warmer. The experience you're having when you speak is your vocal folds vibrating. So when you speak, it's a very nice kind of experience. But when I start off my speech, I always say, who heard their voice recorded? Everyone puts their hand up. Then I say, who here hates their voice? People are whacking each other in the head to get their hands up, because everyone hates their voice. Yeah. Because the way you sound and the way you think you sound are two totally different things. And I'm an evangelist for getting people to hear their own voice. That way they can have the command and control. Because if we as speakers, we as salespeople, we as Instagram personality, doesn't matter what it is, we're all in sales. And if that is the case, and your voice is your identity, and you can't hear it, then how do you know what you're doing?
So
how do you know you're connected?
From the outside, not the way you hear it vibrationally.
No, you got to get away from that.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
You got to sit down and intentionally listen to your voice. And I have a 5-step process that I talk about that I walk people through if they're willing to do it. Because, we as humans, and this research blew my mind, but we as humans look at ourselves. You and I are looking at each other right now, and I'm looking at myself because I'm so damn handsome.
You're adorable.
And I'm shiny. The research says we look at ourselves anywhere from 12, this number's so high, to 52 times a day, either in a mirror, something like this, on our phones, we're getting into the car, we look at ourselves. Mm-hmm. And what I ask audiences is, just give me 5 times a day where you intentionally listen to your voice. Your voice in 1 month will improve so much, you'll be blown away.
Okay, so what is the improvement? Like, why? Like, why do I care?
Okay, why do you work out?
To look massive.
I always say, I bring it back to looks, because everyone's like, oh, this jacket looks really nice. These colors really suit me. People pay money to find the colors that suit them. Mm-hmm. People, get their hair and their glasses and everything stylized and everything. And that is your outward appearance. But you care about the way you look. You present a certain way. What I'm saying is, and my thesis is, that since you can't hear your voice, you have no idea if you're connecting with people, if you're persuading people, if you're influencing people. If you're not where you want to be in your career, it could be your voice if you're doing everything else right. If you're not selling the way you think you're selling, it could be your voice because you're doing everything else right, correct? So it's just this, to me, the human voice is the single most important component, because that's what I use every single day, and I have to change and manipulate it every single day for my work. Overwhelmingly, most people don't even think about their voice, because between 18 and 25, the research is somewhere in there, 22, 23, your voice locks in. You set it and you forget it. But you don't do that with your looks. You don't let your hair grow out. You're on stage with dreadlocks and your face is dirty and there's damage. Yeah, and you're developing nodules. You don't do that. You make sure you always look good. You shower, you shave, you make yourself presentable. The average speaker doesn't even warm up their voice. And I don't want to harp on speakers, but pretty much everybody is speaking today in some form of another. And if you're not warming your throat up, and I'm talking basic stuff, just basic warm-ups and taking the time to hear your voice, like, oh, wow, my voice is kind of, my voice is kind of dead, or I'm speaking in the back of my throat. I'm sure you've met these people when they speak, they're just more like this when they're talking, and they're like, you're like, could you speak up? For God's sakes, I can't hear you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you said earlier, 5 minutes a day, or 5 times a day, listen
5
to your
times
voice.
a day.
So you're saying, like, to go on your voice recorder and say something and then listen to it back?
Take something written, take your thoughts, almost like a live journal, and you can start hearing patterns in your voice. You can start hearing your cadence. And, we all know the Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Yeah, Bueller. I had teachers like that in high school and college, and it didn't matter that it didn't matter to them because they couldn't hear themselves. But all they would have had to do is your cadence. They more research, but there is a specific pace cadence that humans react to. We lock in on, and it's right beyond the point where someone's talking, I'm going to say fast, but they're like, you have to lean in. Oh, what is it? And then you lock in because you want to be part of that. You want to be part of the conversation. But if someone is speaking very theoretically about the human, what happens is your brain does this disconnect. It just disconnects. You're not speaking at a pace, a cadence that is interesting, and you're not speaking at a pace that is like right beyond their comprehension. It's almost too fast. Because you'll notice people who talk. That's why New Yorkers talk really fast, because they don't have a lot of time and they've got to get a lot of information.
Somebody's
across
falling
really
off
quickly.
the island if we don't keep moving.
Right. Yeah. And you're a fast talker too.
Yes, I am.
I've watched you, and that's a good thing. you're putting more content in, and people are more leaning in because they don't want to miss
Trying to
anything.
keep up. Yeah.
And that your brain fires up for that. So this is I've staked out this corner of the world because the human voice is your identity. Obviously your looks are your identity too, but it's 50-50. It's 50-50. And if you've spent so much time on one half of the identity and not on, there you go. You have such a great look. Everyone knows that's you. You know what I mean? And there's only a few people in the speaking world who have like a defined look. And when you walk on stage and you have that great look and you put that thought into it, bam. You know what I mean? I think
That if I go, oh, it's really nice to be here. I'm glad that you all came. It would be like,
and it'd be like, oh, all that work and it didn't pay off because and the power of your voice and the energy of your voice definitely matches your matches your look, your physical identity. And there's somebody, Cassandra Worthy. She's got such a great look, and she comes on stage, and before she speaks, you can hear her voice. Mm-hmm. Before she speaks, and that's when the physical identity matches the vocal identity.
It's so interesting because I go back to what Hannah Pryor is writing a book about right now called The Signal Gap when it comes to trust, right? And when there's a gap in consistency, and she doesn't specifically talk about voice and look, but it in my brain, I suddenly made that connection where it's like when you see somebody and you're like, oh wow, and then they come out like this, and it's like whoa, it doesn't work. Like
right.
It stops you. And trust
probably and
goes down,
it stops you cold.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the human voice. I always ask people, what voice do they kind of really love to hear? And a lot of people say Morgan Freeman, because he has a deep, resonant, beautifully clear voice.
Oh,
and that can be achieved. Men can achieve that because it's lowering the voice. And I always say, go back and watch Morgan Freeman's earlier performances. His voice wasn't like that. He's a classically trained actor, but his voice was much higher. He made the decision to lower his voice. So we get to Shawshank Redemption, which I think is over 25 years old, but he already made that decision. And you can hear in that narration, he has lowered his voice. I can't do him unless it's 4:00 in the morning and I'm on an early flight.
3 cigarettes.
Because my vocal range is yes, exactly. And some scotch.
Yeah.
And my vocal range is limited. I can do I could do like Stallone, hey, Adrian, So, but he made a point. Yeah. And here's a guy who uses his voice every day. And then after Shawshank, if you remember, he was everywhere in commercial voiceovers. Mm-hmm. And then people were ripping him off. Mm-hmm. There were people who were like, ooh, get me somebody who sounds like Morgan Freeman because we can't afford that guy. But what did his voice afford? It afforded persuasion. It afforded influence. It gave all of these things. So and in the back of your mind, you may have been in your car listening to a radio commercial, or you're in the kitchen, but you're hearing Morgan Freeman's voice, and if he's talking about something, it must be good. And that's the power of the human voice.
Yeah.
And if the average person is only using 38% of their voice, and they're leaving 62% on the table, then, you wouldn't go out. Your look is very defined. You have 100% look head to toe. But if you only did 38%, you'd walk on stage and people are like, she's not all the way there, But you've got, you have your look from top to bottom, 100% physically. So I would just love people to take the time and go after that 62% of their voice.
So you're saying, when we go to 5 times a day, let's just get tactical here. Somebody's listening and they're like, all right, I'm ready to dial in my voice. I'm not getting everything I need out of it. Let's go. All right. So 5 times a day, we grab something to read. I just wrote something down on a Post-it note, and I'm just going to read this to myself. What am I listening for? What do I do with that recording?
You're listening for your pacing. Okay, you want to see where are you speaking normally, and there are defined things here. So if you're just reading off that Post-it note something you read, that would be your conversational voice. All right, but if you're giving a presentation, you got 5 salesmen and you're at a Ford dealership, that's going to be different. So you may want to like stand up to do that. That way you can hear how your chest is going to be open. You want to hear that pacing. You want to hear that intonation. Are you giving any intonation? That going back to Ferris Bueller. Are you hitting the words the way they need to be hit? Are you leaving pregnant pauses? And the most basic thing is, are you using your voice correctly? Are you engaging your throat? Are you engaging your tongue? I always ask people, where's your tongue in your mouth right now? And everyone's like, what? It's in my mouth. Yes, but where is it in your mouth? Where's the resting position? And one of the things I learned, and I'm going to circle back to you, is before I speak anytime, because I had a severe speech impediment, I stick my tongue out 26 times and I bite the back of my tongue. Because if you've ever spoken, and when we speak for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30, you're bound to get tripped up, and that's usually your tongue. So if there needs to be an awareness of your tongue, where it is in your mouth, especially for guys. I have a big, thick tongue. That was the main reason for my speech impediment. It was getting that control of it and moving it around so it wasn't, I sounded like Elmer Fudd. When I was a kid, everybody thought I sounded like Elmer Fudd because everything was so big in my mouth. Growth helped a big portion of it, but them giving me those basic rules on pull your tongue back in, lower it when you speak. But what I do is I stick my tongue out as far as it will go and go 1, 2, 3, and I'm biting down. So when the tongue goes back in, it's oh, here. Okay. So I do that 26 times. It's the alphabet. Then I do the alphabet. Then I pronounce letters with my tongue out. So it's just all these little things. Yeah, do that. Yeah. A, B, C.
Oh, I see. You bite it, pull it in, and then say the letter.
Yep.
Okay.
Keep pulling it in, because then you're basically like waking your mouth up. Because when you're going to speak, you want to wake up the thing you're using. Everyone's just like, that whole set it and forget it thing. It kind of works against us. The neurological thing of shutting our voice out, and then our human head giving us kind of a deceptive way that we sound. And it doesn't, and also recording it, you can hear like, oh, I didn't realize I pronounced that way. I'm from Philadelphia. I had to do 2 rounds of accent reduction. 2 rounds. Because I have the typical Northeast United States nasality, which works with a lot of my impressions. Mm-hmm. But conversely, if I have a few glasses of wine, I start sounding like Joe Pesci. I can't even say what I'm going to say. You know what I'm talking about? Because you think I'm funny? You think I'm like a clown? Because now my whole voice is just going up through the top of my nose, like this, and through the top of my head. So, we slide, even with training, you can slide back into these things. So it's listening to how other people hear you. It's stepping back like you do in a mirror, like, oh, I look pretty good. But it's how do other people hear you? Are you getting tripped up on certain words? Is your pronunciation odd? What's going to pull people out of my speech patterns, and what's going to engage them? There's a very funny sketch, and it's from Saturday Night Live, and it was Alec Baldwin, and when we used to leave outgoing messages, and it was like, "Hi, this is Roger in marketing. I'm currently out of the office. Please leave a message." And when he played it back to listen to it, hi, this is Roger from marketing. I'm not here. Leave a message. So it's that, and it was a very funny bit, but it just shows, and he was shocked. He's like, what? Is that me? And that goes back to what I said about hearing your voice recorded. So you want to record your voice in all the different ways that you're going to utilize your voice. And one of the most important and most effective that I have found is recording a conversation. So this, because if you're lucky enough to be on podcast, go back and listen to the podcast. Some people are like, I can't hear myself, but you have to go back and you have to listen. And the other thing is, just do it on your phone. You can record your phone calls now. Obviously, ask the other person. You don't want to end up in jail. But, because after a couple of minutes, and it's even more effective on the phone, because you forget you're speaking.
Right.
And it's being recorded. And then you can hear those odd little things that each of us have. We're all from different parts of the country. We all take on different things, because people always say to me, God, I wish I could do impressions. I wish I could. That's so funny. And I always say, you're doing impressions. Everyone's doing an impression. If I took you when you were a baby from Philadelphia and flew you to London, and you were raised in London, you'd be doing an impression of everybody in London. It wouldn't matter that you're from Philadelphia. If you're raised in London, there is part of your brain that is on 24 hours a day, and it is inculcating every pronunciation, every regionalism. Because if you go to the UK, holy cow, it is nuts. I mean, like right outside of London, there's a different accent. And then you go to Newcastle and you go to Leeds, and my sister's been there for like 40 years. It is remarkable. It is such fine tuning. But everybody who is from Newcastle or Essex, they've got totally different accents, and they always talk about Michael Caine. He was the first Cockney, really well-known Cockney actor. And you can hear all of these differences. How? Because as babies, we take all of those things in. That's level one, is your family. Level two, if you're a rich kid in New York City and you're on the Upper East Side, there's probably no New York accent. But if you're a poor kid on the Lower East Side, and these are not that, geographically, this is not a big, but that is a totally different accent. And we're all taking those things in. And when I say accent, what I'm specifically meaning is this is how you build, how you pronounce words, the pacing, the cadence, all of those things are built in. And so many people now, going back to what I said before, are on camera, are speaking, have all of these opportunities to get in front of people, and all of those people were raised different ways. So little things set people off. So it's trying to have your most authentic voice without as much influence. And this is not in my speech, but I always think about, if you remove the fact that I'm from Philadelphia and I lived in New York and I had a speech impediment, and this goes for everybody. If you took all the layers off, what would your voice actually sound like? What would that be like?
Well, and I'm an interesting study of that, because I was born in New Jersey but moved to Minnesota, and we moved every 1 to 3 years. I lived in Saudi Arabia, I lived in Egypt, so I'm hearing
You're like
different.
I love people like you, because you usually have no accent.
Exactly. I don't know where the hell I'm from, So it's interesting having so many different sounds coming into my ears my whole life. So it sounds like, from a tactical standpoint for the listeners, that if they're not only listening to themselves, but also say, who would I like to sound like? How would I like my accent? Once I've listened to myself a few times and say, okay, I don't like the way that sounds. I'd like to sound more like this. Sounds like listening to this other thing also gets that into your brain. Again, programming that, that environment around you for your brain and your voice to start saying, oh, okay, I want to sound like that.
Right, exactly. And I think we had a discussion, but were you an Army brat?
Marriott. I was a
Marriott.
much
Oh, that's
brat.
right, a Marriott brat. But that's like a perfect example because I've spoken to a lot of actors, and a lot of them are Army brats. When I was in New York studying acting, so many of them were like, "Yeah, my dad was in Germany, and then we were here, and then we were there."
And, yeah.
They had two different things they were dealing with. A, they wanted to fit in so much, and they also knew they had a limited amount of time. So they were like sponges, and they were really receptive, and they were really like clay on purpose because they wanted to fit in, and they didn't want to have an accent from someplace else, and they knew how valuable that was. And then later, as an actor, they didn't have any weird regionalisms, and they saw the world differently, and they were able to like take all these things in, and some of them have the best voices and the best speech because that the focus is on that. They knew what to do. They didn't know how they were doing it.
Right.
But
they just were getting so much input that there wasn't a standard. I can say there's not a standard of what people sound like. It's not South Philadelphia born and raised, hearing the same thing all the time. So that's fascinating. So interesting. And it makes me want to go watch foreign films, and listening to all the different accents and all that stuff. It's very, very cool.
And are you familiar with the transatlantic accent by any chance?
Trans or mid?
Transatlantic accent. It was a manufactured way to speak. And the Katharine Hepburn is the most famous example of that because they didn't want to have necessarily British actors in American films, and they didn't want Americans who were the worst
like
speaking wise.
Yeah.
So they had created this transatlantic accent that they were training a lot of the actors, a lot of the studio actors.
Oh, darling, what are you doing?
Yes, that kind of thing where they all talk like this. Yes, right. And
half a British accent.
Half a British accent, that's kind of what it was.
Without the of Americans.
Yeah. Because people are, they're so aware of it. And when they went from silent movies to sound movies, a lot of careers were ruined because these beautiful women would sound like this. I love you, Reggie.
John.
Channing
is a great example of that. Honey, what are you doing?
Hello, Dolly. Well, hello. How did that woman be on Broadway?
Oh, but, I have no idea. Feel the same way about Sarah Brightman, but we'll talk about that another podcast.
The Sarah Brightman Hour. Yeah, but a lot of the people lost their careers. So what did they do? They immediately went to Broadway because a lot of those people were well trained in their voice. They were focused on voice and singing and so many. And I'm going to use Mariah Carey again because she has a 5-octave range. And but if you listen to a lot of really good professional veteran singers, you'll listen and they have some of the warmest voices because they're always, I mean, I love her speaking voice. I love a lot of Broadway actors' speaking voice. They're very, very careful in how they speak, but also it's just years of utilizing. It's just beautiful. It's like you sit there like, hello, welcome to Broadway Review with Broadway Danny. Today we have so-and-so from Phantom of the Opera. Hello, Richard. Good to see. Their voice is so warm from all those years of being a professional singer and listening to their voice and having someone saying, ooh, you were off. You missed that note by that. And the person's like, I did? And they have to go back and they go, oh, yeah, you're right. I did miss that. That was a half a note down. And it's everything's fine. I'm not saying speakers have to be like that. But even with singers, they need a coach. Athletes need a coach. Business people need a coach. It's one of the things I always say. If you are going to be speaking, find a vocal coach who can help you. And if you're a guy You know, and you want your voice to be deeper, there are coaches who can help you do that. And everything's online. You can do everything like this, you know.
Well, and also think though just for the lay person who's not interested in public speaking, who's not interested in acting or, being a politician, just bringing a little bit of that awareness to what you sound like to other people and the value of that in a conversation and in your ability to influence, in your ability to sell, in your ability to just, have people jump on board with what you're talking about, is hugely valuable. So I love that.
Yeah.
Just be aware of it. Listen to yourself every once in a while. Even if you hate it, you can do something about that. So go do it.
And the more you listen to your voice, the more you'll close that gap on disliking it.
Yeah.
It is jarring when you hear your voice. Oh my God.
Is that what I sound like?
Yeah, is that what I sound?
Oh.
Okay. People can't stand it. They literally avoid it. But going back to what you just said, there's a great book, We're All in Sales. It's To Be Human is to Sell. I think it's Daniel Pink. But the fact of the matter is, again, research shows pretty much every conversation we are having with our kids, spouse, boss, employee, the cop who just pulled you over for speeding, every single one of those is you're in sales mode, like, clean up your room, or there's another way to do it.
Yeah.
Your voice is incredibly powerful. If you, again, I'm just going to keep saying this, if you don't know how you sound, then how can you possibly use your voice to its fullest effect?
I love it. I love it. Well, this is not where I thought this interview would go, but I love where it went, because as we talk about dancing in the discomfort zone, this is a whole new discomfort dance that you get to do, which is go and listen to your voice. How do you sound to other people? And I love that you equated it to how we look. We spend so much time paying attention to how we look. Why aren't we paying attention to how we sound? And as an auditory person myself, I still remember I was standing at the buffet for breakfast before my keynote yesterday in Austin, Texas, and I started talking to this guy, and he had a Morgan Freeman voice, and I still remember as soon as he talked, and I think we probably said 15 words to each other total, I still remember how he sounded, and I almost was like, could you just talk some more? So and the ability to influence is incredible when we have that unconscious magnetism.
I mean, how close were you to him when he was speaking to you?
On the other side of the buffet table.
What's interesting is you're literally getting the vibrations of his voice coming out of his chest.
When it was yummy, I just wanted to live in it. I was like, oh, please talk some more. So awesome. John,
beautiful, baby.
What?
Beautiful, baby. Yeah.
I'm only Gilbert Godfrey. Like, whenever I try to do an impression, it always ends up in Gilbert Godfrey. I got accents, but I don't got impressions. Hey, if people
of Gilbert, what the way he was.
All right, if people are interested in getting in touch with you or finding out more about the work that you do, where do they go?
They go to thejohnnydshow.com. It'll take you everywhere from there. You can follow me on TikTok. I have 6.1 million followers. Just hit 114,000 on YouTube. On Instagram, we won't talk about Instagram. Only 20,000.
You can't win at everything, John.
Can't win at everything, especially on that platform. But just if you go to my website, everything's there, and it's a great jumping off point.
Awesome. I will put that in the show notes for everybody. John, thank you so much. This is so awesome. And all day now, I'm going to be thinking about how do I actually sound?
That's what I want. That's what I want. Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Ed. Awesome being on the show.